Okay, let's continue where we left off. A theology for thinkers. Origen also made a contribution to systematic theology, which means organized Christian teaching. He was the first theologian to set forth his whole intellectual framework of the Christian faith. While he remained loyal to the rule of faith, or Christian teaching offered by the early Christian thinkers, he also engaged in some degree of speculative teaching. He had a broad vision of the universe, teaching that all creatures, including Satan, God's enemy, would eventually be restored to communion with God. This teaching, which turned a common desire into an actual doctrine, led him into trouble. Traditional Christianity has affirmed that there must be an eternal hell or place of eternal punishment and separation from God, given the possibility that humans will choose to reject God eternally, as well as the fact that Satan, God's enemy, and the evil spirits have rebelled against God as well. During the persecution of Christians instigated by Emperor Decius, Origen was imprisoned and tortured. After being released, he died in 254. Did Origen and Clement go too far in accommodating Christianity to their Hellenistic environment and Greek philosophy? They remained true to the faith as it was understood, even while they entered into the spiritual and cultural world of their listeners in order to win them for Christ. They also preserved humanism for Christianity, demonstrating that the best of classical culture could find a home within the church and making possible the careers of future Christian leaders. All right, we will turn to part three, the age of the Christian Roman Empire, um, from 312 to 590. The Emperor Constantine is one of the major figures of Christian history, since his conversion enabled Christianity to move from seclusion to prestige. In the 4th century, Christianity went from being a persecuted minority to the established religion of the empire. The Christian church was joined to the power of the state and assumed a moral responsibility for society. The church also refined its doctrine and developed its structure. Some believed Christianity was achieving victory over the empire, while others feared the culture was distorting true Christianity. The monks who devoted themselves to a stricter Christian faith were the ones later were able who later were able to win over to the Christian faith the barbarian conquerors of the Roman Empire. All right, we'll start with or move on to chapter 10. We're actually skipping chapter 9 because that concerns missionary expansion into the East. And um, I think that's going to be easier to understand if we cover some other topics first of all. So I'm postponing chapter 9 for a few lessons. But we'll move on to chapter 10, laying her scepter down, which is about the conversion of the empire. The Emperor Constantine is known for defeating a rival emperor named Maxentius. Constantine's conversion to Christianity and victory over his enemies was seen by many contemporaries as inspired by God. Constantine represents Constantine represents the beginning of the age of the Christian Roman Empire. The Christianization of the empire was accompanied by imperial interference in the affairs of the church. Let us consider Let us consider how the despised and persecuted religion known as Christianity rose to assume the spiritual leadership of the vast empire. Turning around an empire. In 284, when Diocletian was emperor, the empire appeared to be collapsing, with chaos and anarchy spreading, and numerous emperors claiming the throne throughout the century. However, the collapse was halted for another 175 years, and the empire was revived by Diocletian, who was also a savage persecutor of the church. Diocletian was the son of slaves. He joined the military and became commander of the army before being elected emperor. He proved to be a skilled politician. To better manage the empire, he established 4 imperial courts, sharing power with 3 others. His plan aimed to protect the empire from the anarchy caused by the constant assassination of emperors. Let's look at Christians to the flames. Near the end of his reign, Diocletian ordered the most vicious of all persecutions of the Christians. He purged his army of Christians, commanded officials to destroy church buildings, prohibited Christian worship, and burned the scriptures. Bishops were imprisoned and tortured, and many were put to death. In 305, Diocletian abdicated and forced his colleague Maximian to resign also. One new ruler named Galerius continued the persecution despite public disapproval, while another named Constantius Chlorus suspended all measures against Christians and began to show them favor. Before Galerius died in 311, he realized his attempts to destroy Christianity had failed, as many Christians were willing to die for their faith. Given the tremendous effect the persecution had on public opinion, Galerius reluctantly issued an edict of toleration that ended the persecution of Christians. After Galerius died, a struggle for imperial power ensued. In 312, Constantine, the son of Constantius Chlorus, advanced against his rival Maxentius and sought to capture Rome. Before the battle, he had a dream in which he saw a cross in the sky and heard the words, "In this sign, conquer." He advanced and achieved victory over Maxentius, which convinced him of the power of Christ and the superiority of Christianity, though some historians consider his conversion merely a political maneuver. Nevertheless, he favored Christianity openly and passed items of legislation to assist Christianity and make the empire more just. In private, he also led a Christian family life, giving his children a Christian upbringing, and was himself baptized before his death. Turn to a new capital for Christianity. Constantine also provided the Roman world with a new capital city. He found a strategic town in the east known as Byzantium that he called Constantinople, and which was later renamed Istanbul by the Turks. Christianity had succeeded, or had suddenly moved from being outlawed and persecuted to being favored and benefited. The church historian Eusebius, like many Christians of the time, saw Constantine as the ideal Christian ruler and envisioned the beginning of a new age of salvation with new opportunity to preach publicly and develop structure. Some Christians also believed that the political, economic, and cultural unity enabled by the Roman Empire, would prepare the way for Christianity to reach all people with the gospel, and the conversion of the world would soon occur. While the church gained advantages from Constantine, it also found that Constantine ruled Christian bishops and demanded obedience, even when his orders interfered with church matters. Masses of people also began to enter the church, though many of them did not truly have Christian faith and may have had other motives for joining the church, such as political ambitions. Let's look at the church comes to power. In 380, the emperor Theodosius used an imperial command to make belief in Christianity mandatory. Church buildings in the Christian empire were carefully designed to emphasize the new hierarchy of Christ and emperor. In the West, some church leaders challenged the emperor's authority. One example was Ambrose of Milan, who called Theodosius to repent after he had 7,000 Thessalonians killed at a chariot race, after the people killed a governor while freeing a popular charioteer who had been imprisoned. Ambrose refused to serve communion or the Lord's Supper, the sacrament of the bread and wine that represents Christ's body and blood. So Ambrose refused to serve communion to Theodosius until he confessed his sin and humbly asked for pardon. Later, the Western Church would use the threat of excommunication or expulsion from the church numerous times to humble princes. In the Eastern Empire, no bishop dared to challenge the emperor. The two contrasting attitudes toward Christian emperors became a symbol of the splitting destinies of the East and West. Let's turn to chapter 11, Splitting Important Hairs, which is about the doctrine of the Trinity, or the idea that God is three in one. A distinctive Christian belief is that God is three persons. No other major religion confesses or worships a three-in-one deity. Most Christians acknowledge the doctrine is a mystery, as they describe Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. 4th century Christians, in the age that formulated the doctrine of the Trinity, felt restless about the teaching. Constantinople was full of discussion about the Orthodox understanding of the triune God. Let's look at making sense of mystery. Belief about the Trinity gained major importance after Constantine's conversion. The emperor desired a united church that could bring new life into the empire. He was troubled by reports of the bitterness Christians were displaying over theological issues, even calling for the power of state to banish other Christians from their churches over disagreements about doctrine. The most troublesome dispute in the East centered in Alexandria, where a pastor named Arius came into conflict with his bishop Alexander. Around 318, Arius claimed that the Word who became flesh in Jesus was a lesser God that had a different nature from God the Father, being neither eternal or all-powerful. His teaching appealed to former pagans and Gnostics, since it was similar to their former religion. Arius's views became popular since he combined eloquent preaching with public relations, using memorable musical jingles to teach his points. Alexander opposed Arius and called a church meeting in Alexandria, in which an assembly of church leaders condemned Arius's teaching and excommunicated him. Arius won support instead from Eusebius, Bishop of Nicomedia, leading to a power struggle between the important cities of Nicomedia and Alexandria. Constantine recognized that the issue had to be settled and called for a council to meet at Nicaea, which was attended by 300 bishops. Sitting in the center of the conference hall, Constantine reminded the people that they must come to an agreement on the questions that divided them before committing the resolution of the conflict into the hands of the church leaders. Let's look at true God of true God. At the council, some bishops who supported Arius stated their case in a bold and confident manner. The council was upset and interrupted the presentation since the majority of bishops came from churches that attributed higher honor to Jesus. Arius's teachings lost. The church then had to craft a statement that the council could embrace. In the debate that followed, the most learned bishop, church historian Eusebius of Caesarea, proposed his own creed. Most pastors, however, recognized the need for something more specific to exclude the possibility of Arian heresy. They produced another creed, which included important phrases to describe Jesus: true God of true God, begotten, not made, of one substance with the Father, or homoousion. This final term was probably introduced by Hosius of Cordova, who had influence with Constantine. The final statement was known as the Nicene Creed, which is the standard of orthodoxy or correct theology in Christian churches. All but two bishops present signed the creed. These two and Arius were afterward sent into exile. Constantine was joyful and felt the issue was settled. He gave special honor to a bishop named Paphnutius, who had lost an eye under the persecution of Diocletian. Constantine and his successors often were involved in the affairs of the church, exiling teachers deemed heretical or restoring them when a new group of church leaders gained power. The life of Athanasius illustrates how the imperial power took over control of the church. He may have attended the Council of Nicaea, contributing to and defending the faith expressed by the Nicene Creed. He then succeeded Alexander. In ongoing disputes with Arianism over the next 50 years, he was banished and restored several times. During the debate, a moderate group of semi-Arians, which had broken away from the strict Arians, attempted to change the term one substance to a similar substance. This was a Greek term that was different only by the letter I, or iota. In other words, instead of homoousion, it was homoiousion. So just one letter different in Greek, but it means has a very different meaning. Similar substance instead of one substance. So Athanasius insisted on the one substance position, believing that Christ was of the same nature as God the Father. Although the two positions were different only by one letter, the issues involved represented two sharply different interpretations of the Christian faith. If the Arians had succeeded in getting their views accepted, it would have meant that Christianity had degenerated into a form of paganism, which featured two gods and a concept of Jesus that was neither truly God nor human. So they would have seen Jesus as being a secondary or lesser God than God the Father. and ultimately two gods, and um, not just one God. So that leads us to the mystery of the Trinity. In attempting to explain the doctrine of the Trinity, Christians today occasionally appeal to patterns of threeness in the world, such as ice, liquid, and vapor. These are three um, three different forms of water. Uh, so water in three forms. While these analogies are fascinating and can be useful to illustrate the Trinity, they miss the personal elements in the Christian teaching. The true foundation for the doctrine is God Himself, as God acted in history and revealed Himself to Israel, entered our world as a human in Jesus, and descended as the Spirit to share life with the church. Since God is personal, any example we use to think or speak of God should also be personal. When we search for personal analogies, we find that we may conceive of God either as three persons or as one person. If we think of God as three persons, then God's threeness is clear, and we have to make efforts to account for God's unity, such as describing three persons who are so close that they may be said to share a common life. That is known as the social analogy. If we conceive of God as one person, we have to try to account for his threeness, such as describing the mind, the will, and the emotions of a human. That's known as the psychological analogy. Both of these analogies were used in the early church and have been used by modern theologians. Between the years 325 and 381, leaders in the debate slowly clarified their use of the term person. This theological achievement was led by the Cappadocian Fathers, Gregory of Nazianzus, Gregory of Nyssa, and Basil the Great. They described God as one divine being in three persons. In Latin, the term person referred to a mask worn by an actor. Christians use this term to describe the inner communal life of Father, Son, and Spirit. Augustine of Hippo later used the psychological analogy to describe how humans are created in the image of the Trinity with memory, intelligence, and will. Though Athanasius had often felt alone against the world in his defense of orthodoxy, he lived to see the triumph of the cause he fought for. The Creed of Nicaea was the creed of the church ever after. Okay, so for the primary text this week, primary text 3, I've given you the Nicene Creeds, and you can find it at this website or in numerous books. Uh, but I've copied it here for you, so I'll scroll through this slowly so you'll have a chance to read it. Okay, so for your attendance assignments today, Please write 1 to 2 paragraphs to answer the following question. And please keep this to 1 page maximum. Don't go over 1 page. What is one main idea you learned from today's lesson? So I don't expect you to summarize everything that we talked about, but just kind of one main idea. But try to describe it a little bit. Don't just write one sentence, but try to write maybe at least 2 or 3 sentences or a paragraph to describe what you learned. And be sure it relates to the specific topic that we talked about today. So I had one student that just wrote a general paragraph or a couple of paragraphs describing all of early medieval church history, the first lesson. So if you do that, obviously, in one lesson, then you won't have anything else to write about. And what the student wrote about was things that actually did not apply to the first lesson that we had not covered. So please be sure what you're writing about is something that is covered in this lesson. So there are quite a few things you can choose. And also, as we're covering these, keep in mind things of particular interests. If anything you are particularly interested about, you can choose that as your topic for your term paper. All right. Now for the extra credit assignments, write a few short paragraphs to answer the following questions. This should ideally be between half a page and 1 page. Describe in your own words the main points expressed in the Nicene Creed. What specific details about Jesus does it describe, and how does it respond to the Arian heresy? So this is all from the lesson today. I don't expect you to, and then from the reading, of course, the Nicene Creed, I don't expect you to have to look up any additional sources to find this, but just to respond from the actual lecture and from the reading to answer these questions. Now, to prepare you for the test, I think I am going to choose some of these extra credit questions to ask during the test. So it is good preparation for you to do this, and it does give you a chance to get 3 additional points each week. So I do recommend making your best efforts to do that. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. And again, if you would like a copy of the notes, please include that in your email. I would like to send you all the notes. But I only have your email address if you respond to me, and I'm only going to send the notes if you specifically ask me to send them. So if you would like them, in my opinion, they're helpful to have. So uh, and then that can also help you during the test as well. You're allowed to use the notes during the tests. So obviously you can only use them if you have them. So I do recommend asking me for them so that I'll send them to you. So if you have not done so, I do recommend asking for the notes. Just put a little line in your homework assignment saying, please send me the notes and for each week, and I'll be sure to send those to you. All right, so this will conclude our lecture for today. Hope you all have a good week, and I'm still considering possible field trips for churches, and I am thinking maybe specifically about either Catholic or Eastern Orthodox churches, because that is what we're covering. And I have a few in mind, so I will probably prepare the date, probably not the next 2 weeks, but maybe sometime in May, I'll prepare a date to let you know. Hopefully, some of you will be free and able to attend. I have had students that have attended these church field trips, and I think they've had a good experience. So I recommend that, and hopefully you'll have a good experience too, and you can see and practice the things that we are talking about in this class. Okay, so that concludes, again, our lecture for this week. Hope you all are doing well and have a great week. We'll see you next week. Take care.